So I'm going to switch on over. I'm seeing we got a kind of a dark theme going, which is not my personal taste, but is like where you want to be in terms of kind of modern, especially like developer-centric design. I like that you're playing with some asymmetry, just at a quick hit. We got a navigation, got a TL up there. I assume that's your logo, right? Todd Libby. And if anyone wants to kind of look along as we go, toddl.dev is the URL on that. Be sure to go give that a hit and take a look. So my first impression, and the first quick tip I'd give on this would be, let's look at minimizing our header a little bit more, which I know is kind of ironic coming from the fact that we were working on the That's My Jam Sack today, where I've got an insanely large header. But I think if we tighten it up just a little bit, it's going to go a long way. So let's take a look at that real fast and see what we can get. I imagine it's being sized that large based on the logo. So if we come into the logo area, and let's remove some of that padding. Let's keep the left and right padding, but maybe reduce that. And then let's come into our image. And again, I'm just kind of playing around, so this is not going to be good CSS necessarily, but it is going to, at the very least, get the point across. Now, I keep it about that size-ish for where the logo is, because otherwise you're going to kind of completely lose it. I do like the asymmetry for it, which is nice. I like that it's off-center to this. I think it's interesting that you've got this asymmetry happening with the navigation too, that it's not fully over on the right-hand side. I might actually lean into that a little harder and not go quite as separated between your nav and your logo there. So let's see if I can accomplish that pretty quick here. So we're inside of a flex item, it looks like. Let's see. Nope. Header. Oh, okay, I see. We got the header group here. Inside the header, flex wrap and flex wrap, and space between. Here it is. Okay. So like maybe just have it flex start, right? And like this is actually a pattern that I have seen coming back a little bit. This is actually like kind of old school in a way, like grouping everything on that left-hand side. It kind of stems from the time when like the entire website was on the left-hand side of the page. But I don't mind it. The next thing I'd say is your navigation is a little bit small. It doesn't pull quite enough focus. I don't want a user to have too much of their focus pulled to that navigation, but it helps them navigate the site. It helps them at a quick hit know where they can go. So I think that right now we're a little bit small on that font size. And let's see if I can easily adjust that. Let's see, anchor. Let's just put it on this anchor and see what we get. Font size, here we go. You got variable set, which of course is hard to reset here. So here's something that you're doing in your code that I love, that you're doing a good job on here. You're doing this calc on your font size. So two things to note here in terms of the accessibility of how you're doing this. I love that you're using an incredibly tiny VW that gives you that fluid type that I think we all think is a cool thing. But the VW isn't great for like zoom in, zoom out. So you're using a harder value on the left-hand side of the calc. So that's really, really good. The thing that I would warn you about in terms of accessibility is that absolutely overrides user preferences. And what I mean by that is really on your HTML. How are you setting it? Do you have a font size set on your HTML? Let's take a look. Roots, you got, okay, I'm learning something about Firefox on the variables. They're all here. That's super handy. So what I would suggest doing is setting all of these calculations on rems, which is going to be the font size set on the root element. So in this case, on the HTML. Okay, and you already have that, right? You've got this font size set to 62.5%. I would probably not go in that direction. I would probably have it be at that 100% or be maybe even slightly larger. Just because if you're resetting it and sizing it down, that makes it harder for people to read. They're more likely to zoom in, which might end up causing more issues on your design than you want. So starting from point of a larger font size is usually my go-to. And then from there, let's find our font sizes here. I love that you're setting all these font sizes here in your calcs, and that's good. Where was that calc though? It was 12 pixels if I recall correctly. Here it is. So about 100% in a default browser is going to be, I think, around 16 pixels, and I think that's going to be a good place to come from. So we'll change this to 1 rem plus that 0.3 VW, and it gets us closer to where we kind of want to be in that. So yeah, I think that's going to go a long way. And then I think I caused this issue just with my code changes. I might tighten up the spacing inside of the navigation just a hair, just a little bit. I like you got some padding left and right. Let's see. How are we doing that? I guess each of these, yeah, they bump into each other. So, okay, display inline, that makes sense to me. Let's see. Let's go ahead and up the padding. And again, since I changed that 67% that you had set on your font size, all of your margins that we're looking at right now, all the paddings that you're setting to the rem are slightly more problematic. I would maybe do a unidirectional margin and then tighten up your padding spacing in here a little bit, because you also have, looks like, some padding on your anchor. Yeah, just tighten those up a little bit overall. You don't want them to be too small, oops, because you want them to be highly tappable, and I haven't looked at mobile yet, so I don't know how that's going to be, but just tighten them up a bit. I think it's going to go a long way to feeling good on that. Cool. So let's take a look at down below. We've got some things happening on. I'm going to refresh the page so I can give feedback on that as it stands and not with the stuff that I've already done. Yeah, maybe I won't look at the mobile today, especially since I know at least we've got Swiss to do a design review on now. But for sure, like next week, I'll take a look at mobile, or whenever you've got mobile to a place that you're digging on the nav for it. I do think that your line heights need a little bit more spacing, kind of across the board. So let's see, we've got font size, line height, small. So it's interesting to me that you're setting these kind of harder. You're giving these harder values here, which is those same kind of VWs. What I like to do, and I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority on this, but I actually like to set my line heights based on the current font size. And I like to do that based on M's, right? So like 1.4 M is going to make that a bigger line height than where it was, right? So refresh the page, it's a little bit tighter. So at that point, your line heights, maybe don't set those in your CSS variables unless you want to override something in a specific way, and maybe just focus on using M's for that. And the same can be said down here. I do think a little bit more line height is going to go a long way. Let's see, line height. Okay, you got your line height set on the H3 specifically, but when you reset the font size up here, the line height doesn't carry over, so we also want a line height. 1.3, 1.4 is close to my default for like how I want to do line heights across the board, right? So refresh the page, that's a little bit tighter. Change that up to like 1.3, 1.4, and we get much more comfortable in terms of reading there. I do think that we're a little heavy with this font weight too. I love that you have a font that's got a lot of weights to it, because that's super handy. But I think it can come down a little bit. I don't know exactly how many weights you've got on this font. And maybe increase the weight on this, right? Increase the weight on your intro, decrease it on something that's more body copy. It's going to allow the reader to judge the hierarchy a little bit more. And so really what you want is you want them to read hello, then you want them to read this welcome, and then you want them to read down here, right? As it stands, I read this, and then the next heavier visual weight I have actually pulls me down the page to this paragraph with the bolder font, to this image of you. Both of those are adding a bunch of visual weight to the page, meaning that I'm going to actually gravitate down to it. I tend to think of visual weight and visual hierarchy on a page as being a force of gravity. It pulls the eye, so we can use that to lead the user around. So yeah, lighter font weight here, maybe pull a heavier font weight here, or maybe have them be the same font weight and just have this be a slightly larger font size. And then move into a slightly smaller font size down here, but at the exact same font weight that you've got, right? And again, those line height changes as well. I like that we've got an image of you. I might move that to the left-hand side. I think it pulls focus from this left area down to it and makes me have to come back using variable fonts. I love the variable fonts. I'm just saying like keep those kind of a little bit more consistent and maybe use M's for your line heights. But yeah, maybe pull this to the left-hand side because right now I'm not getting a pure left-hand read because I'm going from here and I'm actually bouncing down to the image. So bump it over to the left, see how that does. You might also play, if you want to do some fun design stuff, since you are floating it, I assume, let me take a look. Let's see, home image, float right. Since you're oh, you've got it, cool, you're already doing it. I was gonna say use a shape outside, that'll be fun. Maybe make it a more pronounced, and I think by moving it to the left-hand side, that shape outside becomes more pronounced. So it becomes, you know, an actual feature on the page as opposed to over on the right-hand side where it just kind of looks like the normal ragged edge. You'll have to play around with the margin on that at that point, but I think that kind of that adds some fun to it. Maybe even make the photo a little bit bigger, especially since we're upping the line height here. Your latest articles, I like that you've got some imagery for that. Let's take a look. I might tighten up the vertical space between your headline and the articles themselves. It looks like we got some padding on the top. That is doing that. Obviously, I'm changing all the ULs on your page, so like, you know, set it on the class, and then also on that left-hand edge. I think the indentation is an interesting idea, but I think on a box kind of layout like this, I think it just gives kind of a ragged edge that we kind of want maybe a cleaner look on the left-hand side there, and also will give you a little bit more room for these to play. Then we move into a copyright and then your social. I might put these on the same line, or at the very least end with your copyright and have your social go above that. Because I feel like social is going to be more important than the copyright, and I want more users to get to that. So bump that up a little bit, maybe even increase the size of it a tad, and go from there. So let's see, let me check chat real fast. All right, and I've been going for about 8 minutes, so we'll keep going for a few more minutes since it looks like mostly just gonna be Swiss after this. I'm gonna jump over. Let's talk about the navigational order right now. So we go about, blog, contact, archive, resources, and projects. So talking from an information architecture standpoint, I'm not entirely sure right off the bat with the naming what's the difference between blog and archive, and I'm gonna look at it and see what that is. But I have to think about that a little bit more. So that's giving me a little cognitive burden, which means that maybe the naming isn't quite right. Go and definitely see first impression of my project if you want. Yeah, post the link. I'm all about it. So I like about being first. I'm a little ambiguous about blog versus archive. I'm going to look at that next. And then I like to say that the two navigational items that are most important in your navigation should be your first item and your last item, because that's where the eye anchors. So as I bounce from your navigation to from your logo to your navigation, again with the increased font sizes that we talked about and the tighter spacing, the first thing I'm going to read is that left-hand side. So about is it's not a terrible thing to have there. And then the last thing is the thing I scan easily across to get to, right? So on that left-hand side, on the right-hand side, having what you like, the action you want the user to take, I think would be a very, very good idea. So is it projects? I don't know. That's going to be a decision for you to make on that point. What's the next most important thing? Oftentimes we anchor a right-hand side with contact, with like, here's all the information that you could possibly want from me, about me, contact. Give them the action at that point. I might also give some form of call to action following this first little paragraph section here. So read my thoughts, go to your blog, view my project, something along those lines, maybe create a button style in there. So now I got to find out, all right, what's the difference between blog and archive? Yeah, okay, that's actually a fair point, right, Todd? If projects aren't complete, pull them until they're ready to go. So this looks like a pretty standard blog, and archive. Okay, it's loading. This might be my internet and not your site. There we go. So scanning through this looks like. Okay, so out of curiosity, in chat, let me know what's the difference between archive and blog. At a glance, I'm not getting it. So let's figure that out, and I'll give you my recommendation on that. And then let's look at resources. Come on, internet, you can do it. Putting out a lot of bandwidth for everything that I'm doing right now. Who can you? Okay, so these are cool tools that you like, I assume, right? Tools that you use on a regular basis, or at least things that that you think are good resources for everyone. Okay, so blog has a set number of articles. Archive is all the articles I've written. Okay, that's fair, because I do see like people don't necessarily always want to like be inundated with everything that you've got. I might have your blog page be the main navigational item and then have a link on the blog page to see the full archive. I'm iffy on that. I'm not. That's kind of a first pass on what I'm thinking about there. But I think the cognitive burden that you're placing on the user to make them figure out which of those they want to click is a little too hard. So I would go with one or the other. And then if you want to keep those two separate ideas, then I would say have your archive be a link on your blog page. All right, so let's actually, so one thing I would say on, let's see, blog, archive, resources, I'm going to assume project. Okay, that's not complete, but yeah, so on all these pages, one thing that I would do is put a short blurb at the top of each of them. So what I would say is I would say like in this area, you're going to put like an H1 because I think it's good for accessibility and for search engines, right? Let's go into main page container. And again, like I like this asymmetry thing that you've got going on. Like if you look at my site has a lot of asymmetry built into it. It's something that we love as designers. So maybe like right here before you move into the UL, let's place H1. What page are we on? We're on blog. So by having an H1 on the page, you give a user a sense of place, right? Okay, so don't have, like, maybe on your homepage the H1 is okay to be the logo, but like that's going to be repetitive in terms of SEO, and you want something to be a little bit deeper in terms of your SEO. And also it gives a sense of place for the user, right? So I click on blog. I need immediate satisfaction to know that I'm in the right place for it. So I would say have, blog and then like a whole bunch of like, just like 2 sentences here that is like a description, and you can have this be the same style on all these pages, right? So theoretically, oh, okay, yep. All right, let's move these. I somehow did not put them where I thought I was putting them. I swear I was editing the page container, but I guess not. Put that there, put the paragraph underneath it. So obviously you'll need to adjust the styles and all that. But yeah, so something to let the user know exactly what they're getting. I think that's especially important on resources, right? I think that's going to make this resources page be very, very easy to grok, very easy to understand. I will say, let's see, I'm going to spend another minute or so on these articles. A couple things that I would recommend doing. First, we're on your site. So I'm going to assume, unless otherwise told, that all these articles are by you. I could be convinced otherwise depending on what you're doing, but I'm going to assume these are yours, right? So I don't think you necessarily need that on there. The other thing I'm going to say is you really want this to be a much larger font size for each of these, and that's partially because your tags, which I don't mind. I don't mind showing the categories on each of these. I think that's a good thing to like let a user know what it's going to be about. They're pulling too much focus. They've got almost the same font size. Because some of them are longer than your title, they have more visual weight because there's a lot more white involved, and they've got that green line. So that's a difference that the user is going to key into. And so like making the font size for your titles bigger is going to draw more visual weight. It's going to draw the eye much, much bigger. So if I'm going to use, let's see if I can find those root values. Just get as close as you can to what I'm about to do here, and we'll say that we want to be like 3.5 rem or so, whatever that ends up equating to in your variable font sizes. Line height, let's take a look, see, probably want the line height to, again, let's do that based on 1.4 m. And then I want a little bit more spacing in between each of the list items. And that's going to allow for me to more quickly scan the page. Data density is a good thing, but I think that we are a little bit too close together. And so we can space it out a little bit more there. And so this gives us, that's maybe slightly too much spacing, but this gives us clear delineation between where these items are. And then I personally like excerpts. And I think you were the one talking early on about Eleventy and how to do that in Eleventy. I use a description front matter variable that I just pull in. You could theoretically, there are ways to create a tag that pulls it automatically as a custom template tag, and you could insert like a more tag inside of that. And maybe I'll play around with that on stream at some point, maybe on Friday. Ooh, interesting. Okay, I have thoughts about this. I absolutely love this idea that you've got going on here, right? Where it's this stacked text. I think that's a cool idea. I don't think it's right for your title. Because again, I want that sense of place. I want the user to immediately know what they're looking at. This is going to make me scroll down to read that. So I love it. I think it's really cool. It might be a place to toss your tags. It might be a place to have like maybe the top category in like kind of a bigger font on that side. Graphically, I really, really enjoy the look of it. I think from an information standpoint that the title is probably not what you want there. Although I do also like this style of the date and the title. I think if it were horizontal across the top, I think that would be an excellent looking style right there.